Three countries now build over 90% of the world's commercial ships. At the Philadelphia shipyard, the largest American-built container vessel in decades was launched, only to be dwarfed by dozens of Asian mega-freighters abroad. Then the yard itself was sold to a Korean rival. The real story is not cheap labour. It is the reason the rest of the world gave up building ships and what that decision exposes about the strategic risks facing global trade. So how did we get here? 90% of all commercial ships launched today come from just three countries: China, South Korea and Japan. Every year their shipyards deliver thousands of vessels, container ships, tankers, bulk carriers that keep the global economy moving. The rest of the world combined now accounts for less than 1 out of every 10 ships built. In 2024, China alone handled nearly half of all new orders, its mega yards running non-stop to meet demand. South Korea specializes in advanced designs like LNG carriers, while Japan focuses on high-tech, energy-efficient vessels. Together, these three nations have locked up the industry so completely that even the largest Western economies now rely on their output for everything from food imports to energy supplies. The concentration is so extreme that a single region's disruption, whether from war, sanctions, or a supply chain crisis, could bring global trade to a standstill. No other sector of world commerce depends so heavily on such a small group of producers. The sheer scale of this reliance means that the fate of global shipping, and by extension the movement of goods everywhere, hinges on the stability of just a handful of countries on the Western Pacific Rim. By the late 1800s, British shipyards towered over the world's oceans. At their peak, they accounted for nearly 80% of all global tonnage, fueled by the empire's need for merchant and naval fleets. Steel from Glasgow, coal from Newcastle, and the reach of colonial trade routes kept British slips launching more ships than the rest of Europe combined. As the 20th century opened, shipyards across Germany and France ramped up, driven by a growing naval arms race. The Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 and the London Treaty of 1930 tried to slow this build-up, setting strict limits on warship construction and forcing yards to pivot back toward commercial work. Everything changed with the outbreak of World War II. American shipyards became the world's engine room. Between 1941 and 1945, the United States built more ships than the rest of the world combined. Over 5,600 merchant vessels in just 4 years. In 1943, at the height of the war effort, a new Liberty ship slid down the ways almost every single day. These ships were simple and rugged, and produced in such staggering numbers that, by the war's end, more than 2,000 sat idle as surplus. Flooding the global market, these unwanted Liberty ships drove new ship prices down by as much as 70%. European yards, already battered by war, found it impossible to compete. The world's shipbuilders faced a glut so severe that it would shape the economics of the industry for decades to come. The Jones Act, passed in 1920, was supposed to guarantee America's shipbuilding strength. It required that any vessel moving goods between United States ports be built in the United States, fly the American flag, and be crewed by Americans. Instead of fueling a strong commercial fleet, these rules created a walled garden. Shipbuilders no longer had to compete with the world. Over time, their costs soared and their scale shrank. Orders for new merchant ships dried up as buyers turned to cheaper foreign-built vessels for international trade. The few United States yards that survived did so by focusing on small domestic routes and military contracts, not the global market. The story of the Philadelphia shipyard captures this decline. In 2018, the yard launched the Daniel K. Inouye, a container ship with a capacity of 3,220 TEU, the largest American-built merchant vessel in a generation. Yet that same year, shipyards in South Korea delivered more than 50 container ships, each 5 times larger. The gap was impossible to ignore. With no way to compete on cost or scale, Philadelphia's yard was sold in 2019 to Hanwha Ocean, a Korean competitor. The new owners kept the lights on, but the yard's future now depended on foreign capital and a trickle of protected domestic orders. The Jones Act, meant to protect American shipbuilding, left it isolated and irrelevant as the rest of the world moved on. Japanese shipyards did not outpace their Western rivals by building cheaper ships, they won by making it easier to buy them. After World War II, the Japanese government turned finance into a competitive weapon. The Export-Import Bank of Japan offered international buyers up to 85% of a ship's price, at interest rates as low as 2 to 4%, repaid over 8 to 10 years. These deals included refund guarantees and foreign exchange backing, removing nearly all risk from the transaction. In 1970, Maersk ordered 20 supertankers from Mitsui, a move that stunned European competitors. Thanks to Japanese financing, Maersk paid 15 to 20% less than any European yard could offer, even though the sticker prices were almost identical. This export credit model proved irresistible. Soon, South Korea's Exim Bank and China's own export credit agencies followed the same playbook, offering generous terms and state guarantees. Private banks in Europe and the US could not match these conditions. In a business where a single order can mean hundreds of millions of dollars, the ability to finance on top of building became the ultimate advantage. The money, not just the metal, decided who would dominate the world's shipyards. Inside the world's leading shipyards, the real engine of dominance is not cheap labour, it is factory scale. Building a container ship the size of a city block is less about welding torches and more about automated assembly lines. In South Korea and China, robotic welding rigs handle around 70% of the seams, moving down steel plates with precision. A single mega yard can assemble dozens of identical hulls in modular halls, slotting massive sections together like Lego blocks. Labour accounts for just $10 million out of a build that costs $150 million to $200 million. The rest goes to steel, sometimes more expensive in Asia than in the West, giant engines, and the sheer cost of keeping a dock running. Asian yards pay their technicians wages that rival those in Europe or the United States. The real savings come from churning out ships at McDonald's speed, not from cutting corners on pay. Margins hover around 10%, so only the biggest survive. The newest vessels now top 24,000 TEU, dwarfing anything built elsewhere. For would-be rivals, matching this scale means billions in upfront investment and years of losses just to reach the starting line. European shipyards have become masters of the fine dining approach to shipbuilding, focusing on the kind of work where craftsmanship is everything. In Germany, a single propeller for a megaship starts with 1.2 million euros in raw materials and leaves the factory with a price tag of 3 million euros. Dutch and Italian yards compete for billion-dollar contracts to build super yachts and cruise liners, where the cost of a single vessel can rival the annual output of an entire Asian yard. The Kourou, a 127-metre yacht built for Jeff Bezos, cost over $500 million, twice as much as a container ship 50 times its size. Meanwhile, American yards have found their own niche military contracts. The Gerald R. Ford, America's newest aircraft carrier, cost $13 billion, more than 60 container ships combined. These projects are insulated from global competition, but they do nothing to restore commercial shipbuilding scale. For everyone else, the barriers to re-entry are staggering. Building just one competitive mega yard now demands a decade and tens of billions of dollars. Re-establishing a dispersed network to rival Asia's capacity would take hundreds of billions of dollars and at least a generation. The stakes are even higher with the Green Revolution. Nearly 4 out of 5 new alternative fuel ship orders already go to China, locking in their lead as decarbonisation becomes the next big driver. The world's supply chains now rest on a fragile foundation: 3 countries, 1 region, and no backup plan if things go wrong. Right now, over 90% of global commercial shipbuilding happens in just 3 countries. If a crisis halts their yards, world trade grinds to a stop, leaving economies everywhere exposed. Shipbuilding's concentration is not just about efficiency, it is a strategic vulnerability that shapes every shipment, everywhere. What would you do differently?